Brittany was the new girl in fifth grade. Everyone was making friends with her. It didn't hurt that she was a very pretty girl with a beautiful smile and long blonde hair, and her family had horses. What was Brittany like as a person? By the third week of school, everything had changed. Nobody liked Brittany anymore. What had caused such a big shift in the way the kids saw Brittany? Well, it started when Kim couldn't find her favorite pen. And then Giancarlo lost his really cool-looking eraser. And during that second week, so many things had come up missing, all the kids were talking about it. Now, I don't remember how it came about, but one of the students became suspicious and looked in Brittany's desk. And lo and behold, there was a stash of all the missing items. This totally changed Brittany's relationship with all her classmates. Why? Well, who can trust a thief, right? Before the school or her parents could even have time to come up with a punishment, hadn't she already received the natural consequences of breaking the eighth commandment? Thou shalt not steal. You see, God's law is not arbitrary. And God's law is not a social construct with civil and administrative rules or laws. God's law is a description of the way things actually work, the way things are in God's orderly universe. Now, sometimes people might call it natural law. Really, it's just a simple description of reality. Cause and effect. In Psalm 119, we looked at this last week, 45 and 47 says, "For I will walk at liberty, for I seek your precepts, and will delight myself in your commandments, which I love." You see, David here is showing an intelligent appreciation for the principles of truth. When God's law is seen as the way to liberty, then we can love God's law. However, you can't love God's law if you see it as arbitrary. You just can't. You can try. You can give it your best shot. I shared last week how my friend Roy was more concerned with God punishing him if he didn't obey. Roy was struggling with following God out of fear. He surely didn't love God's law or love God either. Well, then we have Revelation 14:12. Here's the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. And we know this is a last day verse about God's people at the end of time. And if those people are going to keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus, we have to get this right. Do you think God's people are going to be keeping the commandments out of fear, seeing God as arbitrary? Or will God's people be obedient because they love God's law and have an intelligent appreciation for the principles of truth? Huge difference. But a lot of times it's blurred, especially among our kids. Well, last week I had this slide up there, 3 kinds of law. And just for a real quick review, let's look at the left side with the word arbitrary. Arbitrary law, and just an example would be the Jews being required to wear the yellow band with the Star of David, under the power of Nazism. And the source of authority in arbitrary law is always a person or persons that have the power. And the consequences when violated are totally at the whim of the person in power. And it could be really severe, like a dungeon, a concentration camp, prison, or death. And what kind of governments, when you think of the history of governments, what kind of governments come under arbitrary? Well, the old style monarchies. Remember Louis XIV, I am the state. He was a dictator as a king. And many kings were, emperors in the ancient world too. So totalitarian governments, communist governments, they're arbitrary. And communist governments are not by one single person usually, but by a committee. Now, some parents and sometimes corporate bosses have arbitrary tendencies, and they're not liked too much when they do. All right, so let's go to the right column, social law. Social law, the source of authority is elected officials, or the source of authority is the people who elect the officials. And, you know, those officials are entrusted with, on the county level, usually setting speed limits. On the state and federal level, well, and county level, there's tax rates because of property tax at county. The number of school days or the ingredient lists on food packaging, you know, you name it, there's, you know, hundreds of thousands of social laws that are administrative or civil. And the consequences of social law on the early stages would just be social disapproval or social pressure. That's what the wokeism is all about. Or could be fines or people found guilty in court, go to jail, go to prison. So on social law, what type of governments in the history of government fit this? Democracies, republics, the kind of government we're used to. So let's go to the middle column on call it the third type of law, descriptive law. And it's easiest to understand if you look first at science, like the law of gravity, the law of inertia, law of thermodynamics, the law of what temperature things freeze or boil at, so on. And what is a source of authority? The source of authority is reality. It's just the way things are and the way things work in the creation. And what is the consequences if you break that law? Well, there's cause and effect results, natural consequences. You break the law of gravity, you end up probably dead, all right, unless it's a shortfall. What kind of government is based on descriptive law? Only God's. Only God's. Now, the theocracy of Israel had some of both descriptive and social, but most of their social laws were based on the moral law. So it was probably more descriptive than social, but there's a lot of things that would look the same on the social side. So which of these three laws fits Brittany's situation? Brittany's stealing fits the descriptive law category. You know, ignoring the law of gravity has an immediate effect. Violating the law of honesty, in Brittany's case, took about 3 weeks to reach its natural result. And, you know, things like that, it's just a matter of time, how quickly people know and how quickly they react, how quickly they learn of truth. Maybe if Brittany was a little more slick, she would have pulled it off for months. But when you just steal things and stash them in your desk, it's not going to last too long, right? So I gave much time to this in last week's sermon, so if you're interested in delving more into that, I recommend getting last week's sermon, which is really part one of this. All right, so when we focus on laws of science, descriptive law is easy to see. But the 10 Commandments don't seem scientific, do they? I referred to the law that Brittany broke as the law of honesty. Well, that seems a lot different than the law of gravity. Yet we saw that breaking the law of honesty had a sure cause and effect, just like gravity did, a different effect, but it was sure. It was cause and effect. Now, gravity is in the physical realm, right? Into what realm or category would you put honesty? It's not physical science. What is it? What does honesty or dishonesty affect? What changed for Brittany? Relationships changed. So you see, the 10 Commandments are laws about relationships. The 10 Commandments are actually how God protects relationships. That's verses 12 to 17 in Exodus 20. How God protects relationships with other people. Now, here's an interesting question. If the commandments are so positive, I have suggested that the commandment, thou shalt not steal, is the law of honesty. The law of honesty sounds positive. Thou shalt not steal is put in negative terms. So if the commandments are so positive, why do they sound so negative? Now, I'm going to illustrate this with a real experience I had in my first year as a teacher. My first year as a teacher, I was idealistic. I didn't want to make a whole list of rules for the kids and have them go, oh, we got to have all these rules. I didn't want to do that. So I wanted to be positive. So I said, we're just going to have one rule. And the kids kind of looked up. A teacher with only one rule? That's impossible. So they were listening. I said, yep, the only rule we're going to have in this classroom is to love your neighbor as yourself. Or if you prefer, it put in the terms of the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Treat people how you want them to treat you. So my very first worship with my class was to call them to this high level of maturity of love for kids that were 10 to 13 years old. And actually, they responded really well for a couple days. And then I began finding that they needed more details of what that means. I wanted them to be mature enough to reason it out for every situation and do the kind thing consistently. They needed help. So they needed more details. And the clearest way to get the point across many times was, don't do that. Or stop that. No. What do you tell kids that are shooting spitwads at one another, that's not loving your neighbor as yourself, when some of them don't mind getting hit and use that excuse to fire back? The guys were having great fun. They said, we are loving our neighbor as ourselves. We all like this. Fortunately, some girls didn't want to get hit with their gross spitwads. They said, those are gross. So the guys reluctantly could see that hitting these girls didn't fit the golden rule. But that didn't take care of the problem of them hitting each other. So I then had to explain, well, besides that, you're making a mess, and that's not fair to the janitor. Well, they were ahead of me on that one. They said, well, is it okay if we just pick up after ourselves? And then I had to point out that they were being a bad influence on each other and distracting each other from the lesson on hand, which means they weren't going to learn very well. But that almost seemed a little too deep. But that's the loving your neighbor as yourself principle, and they just didn't really care. And that was another reason some of the more studious girls found it annoying. So trying to get them to understand the principle took up a lot of time. After almost 30 minutes of discussing this, valuable time for getting schoolwork done was being lost. And finally, I had to add to my one rule, thou shalt not throw spitwads in the classroom. Now, when it's put in negative terms, isn't it clear? It's very clear. It removes most ready rationalizations and excuses. Success, right? Well, what's the problem with putting it in the negative? Now the teacher may come across as arbitrary, and the students no longer see the beautiful golden rule principle behind it. At least that's easy to forget. So where are we going with this? Because of the sinfulness of man, God had to express his principles and negative language to make it simple and to make it most clear. Did you know that Paul addressed this in Galatians 3:19 when he said that the law was added because of transgression? He's talking about the whole system of law with Israel, the 10 Commandments, the ceremonies, everything. And you see, the principles of God's law were always there among the angels in heaven before sin ever began. So God's law was always there. So what did he mean when he said it was added because of transgression? He said because of the sinfulness of man, God had to spell it out in negative terms because the human race is dense. Like some of my students were kind of, I don't know how dense they were, or they're playing dense. All right? So basically, when it's put in negative terms, it reduces man's tendencies to rationalize and make excuses. It's not as easy. Now, God knew that with mankind, that he and his law could be viewed as arbitrary because he gave it to us in negative terms. Imagine if God tried to give us the Ten Commandments in positive language, how easily people would have just not got it. And the devil has tried to make the case that this law is arbitrary, this law is negative, and many have been deceived, like my friend Roy. Many Seventh-day Adventist kids were deceived. You know, I went to school in the 60s and 70s, and I'm telling you, at that time, everything was about rebelling against the rules. Now, we want to see what principle of truth is behind each of the Ten Commandments. How would we word the commandments, taking out the negative language, the thou shalt not, and putting it in positive language instead? I'll do my best. At the same time, as we make the language positive, do you think it will be easier to see each commandment as descriptive law, which with natural cause and effect principles? All right, so let's go to the seventh commandment. Thou shalt not commit adultery. All right, I talked about this one last week as my first example on showing that the commandments are descriptive law. But when it says, you know, thou shalt not commit adultery, it's negative language, but it's very clear and it's very simple, right? So let's see what we can do with it. All right, let's put it in a positive language. Happy marriages are only possible if built on loyalty and trust. That's the commandment in positive language. And then when we look at the cause and effect, we say disloyalty to the marriage vows always hurts the marriage. It always hurts the family. Sometimes the kids get hurt the worst. All right? So that one is really a review. So let's go to Commandment 8, thou shalt not steal. This is the one that Brittany violated, okay? So what is the principle? Respect for the possessions and rights of others is basic to all good relationships. That's a positive principle, and thou shalt not steal. You know, true friendships are only possible when trust is there. And she lost all those friendships that had started. All right, now let's back up to the fifth commandment. Honor thy father and thy mother. You know, this one's interesting because you know, parents have different styles, and my wife Lori, her parents' style was quite intimidating and forceful. And she just said no once when her mother told her to do something. She said no once, and she got her mouth washed out with soap, and that was the only time Lori said no in her entire childhood to her mother. Now you gotta appreciate a mother that can be in control, but. In Lori's childhood growing up, her parents, anything she did was either done right or what was wrong with you? Or what were you thinking? And so there was no middle ground, no credit for trying. Nah, it was a good effort. There was no nurture. And so when her parents communicated their expectations, because love wasn't expressed, she hardly remembers ever being hugged growing up. Love wasn't expressed. When you did something wrong, it was pretty strong reaction. And so her parents' rules seemed quite arbitrary. Even if they were based on principles, the manner in which it was done was very arbitrary. So Lori was very obedient growing up, but she wasn't on level 4. Level 4 was obeying with the motivation of love. What level was she on? She was on level 2, obedience from fear. All right? So what we want is we want obedience to be on level 4, where you're motivated by love and you appreciate the principles and all that. And that's my goal in this message, is to help people see with a clarity, and especially the kids or anyone who has trouble seeing God's law as fair. I want you to be able to get to the point where you can be obedient to God and be happy about it, right? All right, so let's go, let's see, we have honor thy father and thy mother. So let's look at the positive. Respect begins in the primary relationship, the family. This is interesting. If respect begins in the primary relationship, that's first with the parents and then siblings. And what we see, I mean, that's honor your father and your mother is just saying the foundation of all your ability to have any relationship anywhere else starts here, okay? And when we look at cause and effect, what if the relationship is really bad? Poor relationships with parents tend to result in poor relationships throughout life. And I can tell you that in the field of psychology, most people that are having severe issues, probably more than 50% of it goes back to the relationship with the parents. It's not all there, but a lot of it is. It's the foundation relationship. And I just want to say this. If you had a very poor relationship with your mother or father, don't despair. I mean, the gospel helps us with these things, right? When you have a born-again experience, you find it's almost like a new parent that can nurture you and help you grow in all the ways you didn't because of poor parenting when you were a child. But the truth of the matter is, there will always be some disadvantages that may work against you from time to time, and that you go to God pleading for help to get through things. And people who grew up in a great family, they don't even know your struggle. But God will get you through, because there's a Bible promise that says, when your mother and father forsake you, God says, I will pick you up. All right, so let's go to the sixth commandment. Thou shalt not kill. It's negative, very clear. All right, what's the positive principle? Love requires a deep respect for and embracement of the quality and sacredness of life. This commandment says, value life everywhere. Anybody, anything. You see, the sixth commandment, thou shalt not kill, is based on the law of upholding the sacredness of life. When one doesn't value the life of others, it has a reciprocal effect. Those who kill often get hunted down and killed by other vile individuals. That's the street gang stuff. But it's not limited to that. That's just where it's the most intense. So if somebody hunts down someone who killed somebody and kills them, that's not a punishment. That's a natural result of violating the law of life. And the Bible says so. The Bible says he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. It's a cause and effect situation. Doesn't mean it'll always happen, because as you know, some people who've been guilty of murder end up having conversions and their whole life changes and God protects them. But God's protecting them from the natural result. All right? If the police get to them first before they get murdered, the natural consequences are actually being held off. They're being held off unnaturally by the protection of jail time. But then again, the consequences may come from one of the many inmates that also lacks love or respect for the sacredness of life. See, it's a vicious circle. What you give out comes back to you. And it's not just in murder. It's also in respect. All right, the commandments are all descriptive law. The natural result is as sure as science, but it has many possible variations and delays which would be a little bit unlike science. All right, so let's go to the 9th commandment. Thou shalt not bear false witness. The positive thing is honesty and trust build the best relationships and the healthiest community environments. When you know you can believe what people tell you, in your neighborhood, it's a happier neighborhood, right? Now, we are told not to bear false witness or tell lies. If people know that you're not honest, that you're deceptive, that you shade the truth to your advantage, they won't trust you. They can't be a close friend. And maybe they'll feel like they can't be your friend at all, especially if you lied about them and made their life miserable. Dishonesty can prevent one from getting trusted with responsibilities. It can prevent one from getting hired for some jobs. Are these punishments for breaking the 9th commandment, or are they the natural result of proving to be untrustworthy? You see? It's a law in relationships that honesty and trust are needed to have relationships that are meaningful. If honesty and trust are not there, neither will there be meaningful relationships. Now, some commandments are harder to understand how there are natural consequences for breaking them. Like if you don't keep the Sabbath, what's the natural consequence? Or if you covet, what's the natural consequence? Or if you don't put God first, what natural consequence is there? Well, let's look at the 10th commandment. This is the one on coveting, because this one's more challenging. Thou shalt not covet. You know what the law here is? It's the law of contentment. And I didn't put that on a slide because it's kind of hard to understand what is the law of contentment. But the principle is to be content with God's blessings and leading in your life. People have a hard time with that. And I'll admit, sometimes I've struggled with it. It's just sometimes hard to be content with God's blessings because you're like, well, I want more like so-and-so. Or with God's leading. Oh, I want God to lead me that way. And a lot of people, they're more than willing to do God's will as long as he listens to their input. See, that's right there revealing that there's a lack of contentment to really just trust God's will.